Today, your presenter will be Rob Makalak, and he's going to show you how you can get better use out of your pivot tables, and show you a little bit about how Santa gets this done. So, without further ado, Rob, take it away.
All right, thank you, Carnegie, once again. So I'm going to try not to. Now, this is of course a MasterMine end user monthly event. So those of you who are here all the time know that oftentimes I wind up just talking through the entire session. I'm going to try really hard not to actually be the only speaker here. I'm going to get a little bit of help from Carnegie in here as well, but I also want for you, the attendees, to ask your questions, because what we're going to cover today here really is basic pivot tables. If you were to, I titled this Pivot Tables 101. If you were to go out and actually look for YouTube videos, you can actually find one called Pivot Tables 101, I think, that at least there was one years ago, that was mostly about how to build a pivot table from a database. In other words, how to connect to the source data and select the tables that you're going to get, and make the joins between the tables and so on. Of course, with MasterMine, all that's taken care of. It's just built into the front end application. So, and because it knows what the goldmine tables are and how they logically fit together, you just sort of pick from several selections and wind up getting your information in front of you. Yes.
Really quick, would you mind hitting record? I'm having issues on my side where it still says I'm in practice mode, so I don't know if people are joining or not at this point.
Okay. Well, it says the session's being recorded, but anyway.
It does? Okay, but
I'll take it just in case.
Weird. Thank you.
Okay.
Carry on.
Hopefully that, and by the way, this session is being recorded, as they all are, with the intention that you can come back and refer to it later on, or if you are actually hearing it right now for the first time, and we're not here on before Christmas.
Nancy's not seeing it either.
Okay, she's not seeing us.
She's seeing waiting for organizer, so maybe I need to start it. This is weird.
Go to webinar. Okay, I wonder if somebody send us something in the question box to just say you can hear us, if you would, just to verify that we're going out over the web somehow.
I hit start. Now I'm seeing attendees.
Okay.
Okay,
anybody?
Do you see people piling in? I can see your screen.
They can now see the screen. Okay.
Beautiful. Don't know what happened there, guys, but I know GoToWebinar changed their interface, and hopefully you got it now.
Apparently they didn't quite get it all right just yet. Okay, well, I'm going to, you know what, I won't repeat everything I said, but I will start with just kind of about where I was, which is to just say we're talking about pivot tables today. It is the core functionality of MasterMine. Most times if you go out looking for sort of self-training in pivot tables, what you will see is training about how to connect up the pivot table with the source data, but not so much how to operate the pivot table itself. And that's really what I want to talk about today, operating the pivot table, dragging and dropping fields, the functionality that's, for the most part, what's built into Excel, although I'll talk a little bit about the MasterMine enhancements to that. So those of you who are on here today are, for the most part, what I'm anticipating is you are users of MasterMine and you've been using it for some time. So I really want to invite you to put your questions in into the dialogue so that we can respond to them and hopefully shape this discussion a little bit around your expectations and not just my own imagination of what you might need. So do feel free, even if you put in one, don't feel like you've used up your welcome. Go ahead and put in as many as you like. I do have an agenda, which I will show you here right now. And I do actually have even a longer list of specific topics that I'm going to talk about. But basically, what I want to keep it focused on is the pivot table functionality itself, how the parts work together, and not in a technical sense, but just so you get a good idea of, when I drag a field from here to there, what's going to happen. That's, to me, the real core of being comfortable and successful working with MasterMine. Can I take a pivot table and excuse me, even as a share user, not necessarily somebody who creates new original reports, but just somebody who has reports shared with me, can I take that and shape it to the specific question that I've got right now to get the answers that I need, right now. What we're going to start with here is I'll switch right. I'll just mention that at the end here, if you stick around with us all the way till the end, you can win a free half-hour online session with. Typically, it's going to be with me. Could be used for report writing, for data management, for tweaking some reports that you want, for answering your questions, doing a little training, whatever it is you want to do with your to move your ability to use MasterMine ahead. That's what I would like to do with you in that half-hour session. So we'll come to that drawing at the very end, and must be present to win. So I'll let me switch over here to there, which is our pivot table, which we actually created here in advance. I just loaded it up here. Now what we did was we took information from the Goldmine demo database and enhanced it a bit, or Carnegie did, and got us set up here with a fairly simple pivot table. Now, and I'm going to use this for my introduction. I may go back and for a different report out of the Goldmine database, just to be a little bit more serious and built around business. But we thought we would kind of go with the theme of Santa and his naughty and nice calculations. Now, of course, there are not 1.9 billion children listed here. However, it is important to know that a pivot table will accommodate as much data as you have memory on your machine. In other words, you don't need to be limited by the fact that a spreadsheet will only hold up to 1 million rows. You could actually do pivot tables on 2-3 million pieces of data, but your limiting factor there is really going to be how many rows you can display, which is the 1 million, or which is probably more than anybody actually needs to display at any given moment. It will also be limited, of course, by speed a little bit. If you're manipulating a pivot table and shifting things around, it is going to slow down as you get up into let's say, the upper hundreds of thousands of records. So when you build your pivot table, think about that as you're creating your reports initially. I've sometimes seen people say, well, I just want to make a pivot table that will just pull everything from everywhere, and then all I have to do is manipulate the pivot table itself, right? Well, it's not quite like that, because the logic of the pivot table is really driven by the structure of the query that's underneath it. If you want something that's, for example, contact-centric, for example, I want to do a report that shows me my contacts and all the information about them, gives me actual counts of how many contacts there are that meet certain criteria. It does not make sense to do a history report that's going to pull one row for every history line in Goldmine, so that if Ambrose Annette Ambrose here had 10 history records, she'd be showing 10 here instead of 1 if we had drawn a history report as opposed to a regular naughty and nice contact level report. Okay, so let's get down to the actual pivot table itself here. We're starting out with a pivot table on the screen here rather than building one from scratch, partly because I want you to see the 4 areas of the pivot table displayed. I'm going to say obviously. There's a word that I really want there that I'm not thinking of. So the 4 areas of the pivot table, when you're just sitting here looking at it, are actually outlined by blue outlines. You may not see them immediately, but this is the column area of the pivot table. It contains, at the moment, one field called naughty nice, and that field has 2 values within it. So the column area at the moment is 3 columns wide, 3 worksheet columns wide. It actually has one field in it, a field that contains 2 items that also have a grand total, or the pivot table itself adds the grand total. So this is our column area. Our row area, on the other hand, is actually too large for us to to actually highlight all of at the moment. I mean, I could go down all the way down the page and do it.
Do your ELF assignment, Rob.
Do my ELF, sorry?
Filter out so you can
assign it.
see it all.
Okay, that's a good idea. Let's get Lori S. Or let's get somebody else. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, there's a good point. And by the way, that does illustrate one of the key things I think people really need to know and that I often see they neglect, which is that keeping the pivot table itself, the entire pivot table contained on the page that you can see, really helps you to comprehend what you've got. If the pivot table runs off the bottom of the page, even worse if it runs down thousands of rows, then you don't really know what it is that you've got. And I've seen people, for example, I'll take the ELF assigned field and just drag it down here temporarily, leave the in this case the sales rep field or the ELF field in the row area, and then just say, well, okay, I'm interested in Nancy's. Let's scroll all the way down here and find Nancy wherever she might be. In this case, okay, we got her at the 112 row, but if she was at the 10,000 row, that would have been a lot of scrolling to get to it. And if you're in your pivot table, it's always easy to simply have the fields up at the top and say, all right, I'm really just interested in, that one user. And that's enough to, if you use the field areas in combination well, you can keep your report within the visible area for the most part, and that's what users really appreciate from a pivot table. Otherwise, you're really just sort of doing, I would say, people kind of get caught up in the idea, well, a spreadsheet is something that's really wide and really long, and they're used to just searching all over it. Well, fine, but this is, to me, a better way to go. I was going into the parts of the pivot table. The column area, as I mentioned, is just simply these 6 fields. Now our row area, the size of the row area has changed a good deal just because I made a selection up here in the filtering area. So I'm filtering only on Rob M. That means my row area is now 3 columns wide. It's the same 3 fields that were already dragged in here. And it's as long as is necessary to display all of the Tory requests within all of the child names within all of the households. And I'll get into how those relate to each other here in a moment. So these are the 2 key areas for displaying the members of fields, either the row area or the column area. Now the third important area, which I've already alluded to a number of times here, is the filtering area or the page area. If you call me up or you send me an email and say, Rob, my pivot table isn't displaying what I think it ought to be, my first question is always going to be, well, okay, tell me what's in your row area. Tell me what's in your page area. And it's good for you to have this sort of common language with me and other pivot table users so that you can answer questions, basically, or so that you can discuss what you're looking at and get what you're after more easily. People often will also confuse the column and row areas. Well, these look like 3 columns here, so why isn't this called the column area? These are actually, each item within the row area makes a row. Each item within a field that's in the row area makes a row. Or in this case, Costa, which is a household name here, there are 2 names there. There are 2 items within it, so in this case, Costa in the household field makes 1 row, but that row gets split into 2 different rows because there's further detail beyond it. Okay, so I've mentioned the 3 main areas of the pivot table. Now the 4th area is the data area. That's where your numbers are. That's where we can show counts, sums, dollar amounts, dates, numeric values calculated various different ways. So the data area is the bottom right part of the pivot table. So now how do I know where my field is going to go when I go to drag it someplace? I'll go and I'll grab, for the moment, I'll grab the score field here. And I'm going to drag it out over my pivot table. And as I do that, note that there are several visual cues that tell me where this field would go if I were to drop it. The mouse icon is sort of the first one, and if you can't see the mouse very well, It actually needs to be over something. Okay, here we go. If you can't see the mouse very well, just sort of, lean in closely. The mouse icon itself shows the 4 areas of the pivot table I just talked about. The left hovering over currently is the row area, and you can see it highlighted in blue in the little mouse icon. If I go up here and hover over the page area, you see the top part highlighted in blue. Likewise, if I go to the column area, score field, and I drag it and I just drop it to the right-hand side of toy request, I will see a score. Now, this may be a score that Santa's using to determine, naughty and nice or something else. But when I added the score field to the right of toy request, I'm going to drop it off again and then come back once again to hover. What I want to point out is, as I am on the right-hand side of the toy request field, but to the left of the data area, so in other words, I'm the farthest right place that I can drop something in the row area, there's a vertical fuzzy line in between toy request and the data area, and that tells me that's where this field is going to drop and its field items are going to display when I let go of my left mouse clicker. Now, if I move over farther to the left, within the toy request field even, you see that fuzzy line shift over so that it's between toy request and child name now. Go even farther. So basically between the middle of this one and the middle of this one, anywhere in there, that field will drop in between those 2 fields. And likewise, if I go past the middle of this one, then it will drop in between the 2 before it. Now, positioning is really important here, of course, not just because of how things display, because of how they, which place they're going to display in, but also because of things like sorting. By default, once again, I'm going to drag the score field out. By default, our report sorts from left to right. Actually, always it sorts from left to right, I should say. The leftmost field governs the sorting, the top to bottom sorting. The leftmost field governs that, so we are currently alphabetical by household. If I wanted instead to alphabetize by child name, I could move the child name over to the left, and my sorting is immediately alphabetical by child name. Now, there's a setting within each field that allows you to fine-tune that sorting. So the setting, if I do the drop-down here for child name, for example, and have this show going from Z to A instead of A to Z, that's pretty straightforward. It's still the same field values governing it. It's just that they are Z to A instead of A to Z. Or, well, in this case, it won't be a very meaningful thing, but I can sort these by the value that's in the row area, or sorry, in the data area. So my third option here is to actually choose the data area as my sorting mechanism. Now, in this case, it's 1 for every kid who's in here, so it's not going to change the sorting if I were to do that. I'll go back to A to Z here. And we can talk about that later on. Actually, I think I will when I use it, when I have a different query in here. Okay, so let me go back to make sure I'm with my agenda here. Okay, visual cues, blue outlines, horizontal or fuzzy lines. Oh, okay. One last thing I wanted to point out about the fuzzy lines of where you drag and drop things. Adding an additional field, let's say I was going to take our score field and drop it into the column area. You also get that horizontal fuzzy line that indicates, okay, in this case, we're above naughty and nice. So in other words, if I add the score field in here, we'd have each score, and then with each score, nice or naughty. Or down below here a little bit, and this is just halfway, again, the place where it changes is about in the middle of the field. So here, if I drop it, it would be between nice and naughty and the data area. So we would see all the nice basically broken up by all the scores, and naughty broken up by each of the scores. So I'll actually do that. I'm going to drop it here so you can see what that looks like. So within nice, A, B, and C scores. Within naughty, D, and X. Oh, I see. We actually naughty and nice must be a grouping of scores. Carnegie built that, so I'm.
Yes, you're learning.
Okay.
I'm one of Santa's elves.
That she certainly is. Had we chosen to drop the score above them, we would see A, B, C, and D, and then within it, the label that goes with it. Nice, 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 and then naughty, naughty. Or if I just kind of do this another way, so Santa might want to break these up by state so he can plan his route. So here's all the nice ones: Arizona, California, Colorado, et cetera, the states that they're in. And then if we were to go farther over to the right, you would see after all the nice ones, then all the naughty ones with the states repeating in all the rows. Important tool, which I always want to emphasize that people use, is the Optimize Columns button, so that when you drag a field in and it does stretch the pivot table off past the right-hand side of the screen, it's often very useful to hit the Optimize Columns button, which will shorten our columns so that they are just short enough to display whatever the information is there. It's not a guarantee that it will get you back right on the page, but oftentimes it will save you a lot of real estate and a lot of dragging and scrolling to make frequent use of that button there. So this is just by way of illustrating also. Okay, here's all our nices with all the states. Now there's some nices in California, some naughties in California. Apparently everybody in Arizona is nice, but California, you can see it shows up in both places because there's some under each one. Okay. So, all right. So that's our pivot table areas and sorting. Let's see. And I'm going to come back to numbers later on. Oh, actually, you know what? I won't do that. I do want to talk about sorting by numbers here. So what I'll do is I'll clone this worksheet. And my thought was I might want to do toy requests. So now cloning the worksheet, of course, is very handy because it allows you to do things like completely reorganize the report while still being able to go back to your original. So in this case, we've taken our toy request. So Santa's got, what's been requested. Just looking at a little analysis on this. Let me just do. Let's go to all here. So with a little analysis on here, what I see is we've got obviously many more nice kids than naughty kids. That's a good thing. And you might actually do some things in here to figure out, for example, well, are the naughty kids desiring more of certain toys versus the nice kids who want more of other toys? Hard to tell just looking at the numbers here. An obvious way to analyze or to sort of get a quick idea of that might be to do a chart. So I'll just throw a chart up there just in case it tells me something. Not sure that it will. So to do that, of course, I hit Design and then, on the pivot table part of it, I just did Options and Pivot Chart, and that allowed me to do the report. What I can see there is that among the nice kids, the most popular thing is the Fairy Princess. There's no shock there, I suppose. Among the naughty kids, a little hard to tell which one's the most popular, but look at this. We can reorganize these. Let's have the naughty kids show up first. And so now our naughty ones are on the bottom, and we can see that the naughty ones, for the most part, well, what do we got? Scooter, basketball, rollerblades, skateboard, easy bake oven. Those naughty girls who want the easy bake ovens. Okay, so
they want to cook their dolls.
Maybe that's what's going on there. Okay, so now the reason that I wanted to do this was to illustrate this sorting mechanism. So right now, actually, it's actually sorting. I don't know if we've got any sorting going on in here. Probably it's sorting actually in order of the appearance of the value in the database, which is not very meaningful at all. So again, our three choices after the default, after just manually shifting them in orders, is A to Z, Z to A, going in reverse here, or in this case, let's go from the most requested toy down to the least requested toy by clicking clicking More Sort Options, and then choosing Descending by C1 Account No, which is the value that's in the field area that's going to determine, and that value is actually being counted over there. So when I say OK, it's going to be descending by the total number. Now, if we wanted to now you can see the nice ones, those are actually all mixed up because we're going by the grand total by default here. But let's say Santa decided, okay, I'm not even going to give toys to the naughty kids, so I want the most requested ones just for the nice kids. Translate this to, real business meaning to you. But if we wanted to focus, if we wanted it in descending order by the value that's in nice, we can't just choose that field as our sorting mechanism, because it's really sorting based on the appearance within the data area. But if we were to remove the naughties entirely, temporarily, that would leave us with only the nices, and that would allow us to have them sorted that way. So if I actually just go in here and turn off naughty as an option, which wouldn't we all like to do that with our kids? Turn that off as an option, and now the toy requests are in descending order by how many nice kids want that toy. Okay, so I'm going to take the graph off of here because that's no longer necessary. Okay, so wanted to really cover the sorting part of it very thoroughly because that is one of those very common perennial questions there. By the way, if you have any questions, I'm going to pause a little bit here every once in a while, or try to pause along the way here. If you have any questions or comments about what you've seen and need to have a clarification, please go ahead and put that into the question dialog in the GoToMeeting dialog.
Well, I have a question for you, Rob.
You do? Okay, go ahead.
I do. What really is the value of using the data area, and the difference between the matrix reports you talk about a lot and the line listing? What benefit do they have?
Benefit of a matrix report versus a line listing report?
Yes.
Well, they have very much to do with just what information do you need. So I think you probably have an answer in mind as you're asking it, but I'm gonna answer mine, and you suggest what you think.
Okay.
To me, a nice matrix, for example, what we're looking at here is a matrix. It's one field going down and another field going across. Now, we might have a number of different statuses going across: nice, naughty, kind of nice, not so nice, and so on. So as long as it's a limited number of them and not just simply a display of lots of information, your matrix gives you a nice summary. And a summary, as we've said, that we can control very, very well. So, turn off certain ones, leave other ones on, take it out of, be able to switch from one to another without really going through a lot of different possible values. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. See, here's a mistake I just made. I dropped child name into the row area. There are so many children's names in here that they run past the 250 limit on columns in a spreadsheet.
Good to know. I didn't know there was a limit there.
There is, in fact,
250.
a limit. Yeah. So as you decide what field you're going to drop your field in, what area you're going to drop your field into, you always want to think in terms of, well, how many possible values might there be to display there? In our case, we might have very limited number of regions. We actually do in our database. So limited number of regions, that is a field that makes sense to drop in the column area possibly. But individual children's names, that doesn't make any sense to drop in the column area for the reason we just illustrated. Now, if really what I was interested in doing was comparing one child against another, even though there are lots of values in there, one easy way to go about this would be to say, well, okay, let's just choose those two children that we want to compare to each other. Or I'll choose 3 because there we go. So now in that case, it's okay to have a field that's got lots of members in it displaying the column area, but only because I knew from the start I was going to be restricting it to just a few of them. Now, I may not have quite answered your question here, Carnegie.
No, I think you did. I've noticed a lot of people that are continuing to use just line listing reports.
Oh, and never do a...
Yeah, they're not really familiar with the whole matrix and what value it has. So. Oh,
okay. Yeah, let me expand on that a little bit. So there are many kinds of reports, but the report, when people think in terms of, well, MasterMine's a report writer, and what do I do with reports? I make lists of things. Because that's just sort of the mindset that's built around doing reports. And of course, it's very easy to make what I would call a line listing report just by dragging fields into the row area, as many as you need. We might choose to do that, put our naughty and nice in there, have the birthday of the children right in here, have their addresses and phone numbers, even if I didn't include their phone numbers, but what state they're in and so on. This very quickly becomes a list of whatever fields you want in whatever order you wanted to have it. So making a line listing like that is I wanted to optimize columns here. So making a line listing like that is a relatively easy thing to do. And I don't want to say a line listing report can't conveniently become a summary or a matrix report. And not vice versa. You really can go from one to the other, but think in both ways. Carnegie makes a really good point that people can get a little bit stuck thinking, well, if it's Excel, I'm used to seeing lists in Excel. It must be making a list is what makes most sense here. And actually, it's the table part of it, the matrix aspect of it, to my mind, that makes it the most valuable.
And somebody posed a question. Can you show them how you removed that chart?
Oh, thank you so much for posting a question, whoever that is. Yes. Let me just go ahead and put the chart back in again. Like so. So I'll make the chart actually look a little nicer here before I destroy it. So what I did was, now if you select anywhere on the chart and hit the delete button, boom, it's gone. Very complicated. I think there's probably other ways to do it, but that's the way. That's my sort of go-to way, is just select the chart and hit your delete button on your keyboard. Thanks for asking a question. Anybody else, jump right in and ask. Okay, so we talked about those main areas. Filtering. This is something that oftentimes I will find people sort of, again, it's kind of a natural impulse to want to filter things inside the report only with what's displaying. I'm interested in the Northeast only. Well, okay, so we drag the region field in, and then we choose, or we maybe unchoose everything in there and select only Northeast. Now, there's a number of different clicks were required for me to do that, right? I had to drag region down to the bottom. I had to unclick everything by clicking on the Select All button, and then I clicked back on the one that I wanted to include, Northeast. Okay? And the result of my report is, in the display area, it says top request, or toy request, and it says region after every one of them. Or sorry, it says Northeast after every one of them in the region column. Now, to my way of thinking, that region field is a wasted position in the pivot table, and wasting positions in the pivot table actually is not a good idea because it weighs more heavily on the memory of the machine to actually display all of that. It makes it change slower when you drag fields here and there, as well as it's uninformative to the user. If I were looking at this report as a user, and let's say this was printed out, I might assume that you're displaying the region down here because sometimes it's not Northeast. And if it goes, especially if it's a really long report that goes way off the end of the end of the page, let's. Oh, okay, we're only seeing Northeast here. So, but if it were one that went way off the page, then I might think, well, I have to scroll down to find out, what's there that's not Northeast. The more sensible way to do this, I'm undoing it by sort of undoing all those clicks, which is actually another thing. A more sensible way to do this is just leave that field up in the top and use it as your filter. One click to choose which one that you want, and that's our Northeast report. And if you really wanted something else, it would be easy to change it to Midwest and so on. Now, the one big advantage of doing it that way is this top area then becomes part of the header of your report. So when I go to print the report, let's go MM Tools and Did I just go to the wrong one? Shoot, I did. I wanted my page set up actually, and do my print preview. Here's what my report would look like. So not only do I have the header at the top of the page that tells me what tab am I on, what's the overall name of the workbook. This is all the default heading stuff that's in every MasterMine report. But I also have at the top, I can see, well, this is just Midwest region that we're looking at right here. So I might print this one out, hit the print button, go back into the report, change this to, Northeast. So that's my Northeast report. Again, go to print it. You could actually go from page to page to page and print out your reports if that's what you're going to do very quickly and conveniently just by changing that as a header. Now these other fields, maybe you think, oh, well, that's ugly. I don't want all these other fields showing up in here. And they're set to all anyway, so that's not informative to the end user. Well, that's fine. Go ahead and move the ones. You can actually drag them manually off the pivot table. Even anywhere that's, by the way, this is sort of the fifth area of the pivot table, so to speak, is no area at all. You see how the mouse icon changes to an X, indicating that when I drop it, it's gone. Now it's not completely gone. It's still available over here in the field list on the right-hand side, but it's not, it's not part of the display area, so not cluttering up the display. By the way, in some of the reports that you start with, you have a lot of fields in the page area. MasterMine toolbar up here has a nice item called Hide Unused Filters, which when you click on it does exactly that. Takes those unused filters, moves them over to the fields list, and then it optionally allows you, if you say yes here, to shift the pivot table up on the page so that your report really only occupies as much space as you need it to on the pivot table on the worksheet.
I'm going to throw something out there. Nancy just brought up something. You can also save, if you needed to, a report for each different region. You can clone this report and select the different regions. Very
easily, yes. And in fact, might even name your, so there's our Northeast report, clone it, change this to Midwest, name this Midwest, and so on. So you could actually proliferate out 5 or 6 different versions of this report. And the advantage of that is for your, let's say you've got users who you just don't even feel you can even train them to change the region field at the top. They at least know that in a workbook you can go from page to page to page to see different information. And that might be the way you lay out the report for the executive who can't be bothered to learn to do some things like pick something out of a drop-down. So yes, good point. Oops, I think I want to leave this on Midwest here just so I'm consistent. So it goes with the tab name. Okay. By the way, I keep on saying by the way. What I mean is there's lots of different ways that you can go simultaneously from any one point in a pivot table. That's one reason that people find it a little bit confusing. It is also at the same time sort of an indication of the power that you have, that you can really go a lot of different directions with it from any point. So keep that in mind while you're working with your pivot tables. Okay. Let me go back to my agenda, make sure I'm covering everything. So I did talk about, I did talk a little bit about filtering on display fields. And I want to emphasize, I don't mean to say that you should always filter just on the top, but certainly if there's only one item within it that you're going to be using, then filter it at the top instead of down below. Within here, of course, it is certainly possible to say, well, really I just want this to show the legitimate ones here and leave off the ones that are not legitimate. Easy enough to do that. Hide the ones that you're less interested in, and of course use that field judiciously to or drop it in the place that makes the most sense to display what you need to see. Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking my list of topics here. Roll up, roll down. Okay, so this is after the sorting. Roll up, roll down is one of the key things that's the most valuable aspects of the pivot table. So by roll up, roll down, what I'm referring to is just the ability to take a field that's in your row or your column area and roll up the values that are within it. So if we wanted to roll up Canada, for example, very easy to just roll that up into one row. So all the numbers that are in the data area get rolled up again to their totals, or roll it down. Now, in this report that we've created here, this is obviously in some ways a sensible way to do this if we wanted it by region and then within region each toy request. That's one sensible way to lay this out. Another way to approach this would be to actually start out with all of the regions rolled up, but roll down the one that you want. And it's just a different approach to the same data, but it's something that oftentimes I think gets kind of missed, especially when you're giving a summary to that executive person who just wants the top level summary to start with. If you start with this field rolled up, and Goldmine, by the way, has a couple of ways of referring to it. I like roll up, roll down, so I hit roll up on that. If you right click in here, I didn't mean Goldmine, I meant Excel. Expand, collapse is another term that they use. Those are also expand the entire field all at once or expand individual items within it are choices here on your short menu. That's basically what we're doing up here as well with the roll up, roll down.
Just right clicking in that area.
Right clicking anywhere on the field, right, allows you to expand or collapse for that one field, for the region field. Now, don't get confused by this. If what you want to see is the toy requests for Canada, don't go up here and expand everything. Just hit the plus, and that'll expand those, or hit the minus to roll that back up again. To me, this is a really convenient way to see your information within context. So, and you might do this with, let's say, individual quarters of the year. All right, I'm really interested in the fourth quarter, but I still want my information from the first, second, and third quarters to compare it with. Well, this is a good way to do that by rolling down only the fourth quarter, but leaving quarters 1, 2, and 3 displayed but summarized. It would be a good example of that. Okay. So I encourage you when you deliver the report to when the sales manager says, I really, the sales manager who's report phobic says, I really want to see a breakup of our naughty and nice by region, a breakdown of our naughty and nice by region, but I also want to know which toys they're actually buying within each region. Well, this would be the way you would lay that report out, presumably. And the way to deliver it to them, in my opinion, is rolled up like this, but explain to them, when you're ready to look within each region at the toys, just roll it down so you can see what those are, or roll back up again. Of course, they may choose to do this, some different ways. They may say, well, what I'm really interested in is only the nice ones, and I want to see the regions going across, but I want all the toy requests so I can see how many we need in each, all together, as well as within each region. Okay? So I just, as a sales manager, I just gave some orders for a different way to see this very same information. I would expect there's a couple ways to approach it. One is to actually teach the sales manager to do that, because it's not actually going to take many moves to accomplish what I just said. So I'm cloning this to display it here. So they're interested in only the nice ones. Okay, fine. Let's go up here and choose nice as a filter. Let's show our regions going across, but still show all of the regions. So then we can see here's the total number of each different toy that's being required by these nice kids, and then within each region what those are. And all I did was copy the report and drag 2 fields to different places, and that gives me a distinctly different view that answers a different set of questions from the sales manager. Okay, so that was roll up, roll down, and then a little fancy plants display there. Let me get to my agenda here. There we go. Okay, grouping. I'm not going to go into grouping very much on the pivot table here because we did a whole webinar about grouping just 1 month ago. But I do just want to allude to the fact that if you missed that, please see the recording from last month, from the November 2014 on various ways within reports to do grouping. Just to kind of, what I do want to just sort of quickly mention is you can drag select, or you can manually select ones to go into same groups all together. Hit
Control.
Control. Oh, and by the way, one thing that I just find very annoying is that little screen, that little pop-up thing that comes up there. In a few moments here, I'm going to talk about table settings, and that's one of the things that I like to turn off. I always like to turn off when I'm working with a pivot table, because I think that the context tooltip, at least the way it's presented here in Excel, doesn't really tell you very much. In this case, that I'm on Barbie and something else. But just as far as grouping is concerned, you can select and make groups within your report again, and then leverage your roll up, roll down in sensible ways, so that your grouping works together with that roll up, roll down. I'm going to ungroup that, and then of course there's date grouping. So really, when people say I want a date range, what they really mean is, or I shouldn't say that's always the case, but most often what they mean is I want to be able to choose a particular month, or a series of months, or of years, or of weeks. And date grouping is the way to go to accomplish that. I won't go into that now because it's like I say, it's a whole topic all by itself. And then there's numeric grouping as well, 30, 60, 90 kind of things if you're grouping on number of days between a couple of dates. Do we actually have a numeric field in here?
Yeah, birthday. Well, that's date. Never mind.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. I'm going to leave that with the birth date. Almost there on the. Okay, so that was grouping. Okay, so the last set, or actually not the last thing, but I want to talk about the toolbars that are built into Goldmine. And I'm not going to go through everything that's built into Excel. I keep saying that. I'm not going to talk about everything that's up here in the toolbars, but I think it is important for you to know some key things that are in these toolbars. I already pointed out the pivot chart, which is I think the most important one, the most commonly used one that I know on the options toolbar. The other important ones that I want to point out here that people are often not aware of are these buttons right here under Actions. Clear, if you click on Clear, what it basically does, here, let me just, rather than wipe this down, I'm going to clone it. So on this new one, on this pivot table, I'm going to click Clear, and you can see pretty obviously what it does. It would clear all the fields out of the pivot table. Quite simply, leaves us with only the structure of the pivot table open and the ability to drag fields in again. So that's basically a way to get back to square one on your pivot table itself. It's a nice button. It was not in earlier versions of Excel, but it is now. I'm going to actually delete this sheet and clone it again because I want to point out one other kind of clear, which is clear filters. So right now we're filtering on only nice and only certain regions. How do I know that? Because I see a little filter icon in the drop-down that's in the drop-down arrow that's associated with those fields. There is no filter icon over here on the toy request. This is just actually it's a downward arrow indicating we're descending by something. In this case, descending by the number of requests for the toy. So if I hit clear filters, what it would do is remove the filtering on naughty and nice and remove the filtering on region so that we now see all regions and we see all naughty nice. Now that's a nice field to have if you're troubleshooting. Oftentimes if somebody calls me up and says, hey, my report is not accurate, I know for a fact the numbers I'm looking at are not right. Usually what we find out is they're filtering on something and they didn't really realize they were filtering. So the first thing, of course, to do is look for that little filtering icon on drop-downs. But if you've got a whole bunch of fields in there or it's a little confusing for you, you can always go to this clear button and just hit clear filters and it will open that up and display everything. Now, you may not want to see everything that's there, and that's why I think it's a good idea to clone your report first and then do your clear filters, so that you don't lose all the filtering that you had set up before. And you might get your answer on the clone and say, oh, okay, now I realize that we were missing some because we were hiding the ones that had no regions. So I better, go back and either account for those or do something in my data to fill those in or whatever it is. The other item here that's kind of new in Excel is move pivot table. So I can actually move this pivot table to a new worksheet, or I can choose just another location where I want this pivot table to show up. I might say I want this pivot table to be duplicated on the other page over here. Say OK. Sorry, it's not duplicated. I've actually moved it off of the table, off of the sheet that it was on, and now it's on.
Oh, that's
on
awesome.
this other sheet. Yeah, it's actually a really nice little.
I've not seen that. Nice.
So, when you go to work on dashboards or to set up more complex reports where you need to display something sort of in parallel that you could not do in the structure of a single pivot table, but where two pivot tables side by side or top and bottom actually can display what you want to see, that's a pretty useful function to be able to have your pivot table be in the place where you need it. So that's something nice to have.
You could actually do all regions on one if you wanted to, how we were spreading them out on different sheets. You could just copy and move it to the same sheet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Have them next to each other.
Yeah.
You could. I'm not sure that you would be. Well, yeah, in a way, I guess so. Yes, you could do that. So here's our. Well, this one's already been changed around to do other stuff. Field settings. Sorry. I want the design toolbar. Sorry, I wanted to finish up on the design toolbar. Sorry, on the toolbar is up here. So I showed you the key things I wanted to on options. For design, the main things to know about here are totaling and subtotaling. There's nice buttons here for either turning them on or turning them off. So you can turn off the grand totaling, in this case for both, or neither, or turn them on for both. By default, they're both on. Grand totals are. And the other area I want to point out is the styles here. You can choose from many different possible styles, all built into Excel, and you can even, I think you can, if there is no style assigned to it already, you can actually hover over various ones and see what it would look like. I'll clear the style here. So, oh, all right, it's not working for me. Thought it did that. But anyway, so you sort of get the point. You can choose among the different styles, and these styles stay with it. So even after you change the actual content of your pivot table, the style sort of moves with the data, and moves back, for that matter, when you roll it up again. Okay, so that's styles and tools. I'm actually not going to go into the tools here. So the last thing that I wanted to cover here is actually table settings and field settings. And there's kind of a lot of stuff under table settings and field settings. But there were, again, key ones that I wanted to include. I will go to table settings here. So, and by the way, to get to table settings, the typical way that I do it is by right-clicking on the pivot table and going down here to pivot table options. There's a lot of settings within here, but the key ones that I wanted to cover are on the Format tab for empty, this area right here. For error values, show something. So oftentimes in your data area, if you have a calculation and it's to divide by 0, or it's something happens so that within the logic of the pivot table, you see errors come up in the page area, or in the data area, and that's not all that uncommon. Then you want to indicate, okay, do I want to see those errors, or do I actually, if we're dividing by 0, should it really be showing a 0 there? If that's the case, you can go in here and actually tell it, show 0 for those. And likewise for empty cells, you can do the same sort of thing. Do I want there really to be a 0 in there for all these ones where we don't actually show anything? I should show you what that looks like. So that actually fills them in that way. So that's actually the only thing that I wanted to show you on the Pivot Table Options tab. Under Totals and Filters, the Custom Lists button. This is an important one people don't often know about. If you are sorting, if you've got a field that's got lots of possible different values in there, and some of them just happen to be, for example, one of the days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not because the field actually contains field day names, but because it's, let's say, a last names field, and some people are named Sunday, or whatever. If that's the case, and you don't want Sunday to show up at the top of your list, and sometimes you'll see that you'll sort a field, and you'll go, oh, why is it that it's not alphabetical in order? It's actually in order by, it includes the days of the week first, and then all the other values in that field. It's because by default a pivot table does use your custom lists from Excel when it does its sorting. So oftentimes you'll want to go ahead and turn that off for that purpose. The next table setting is over here under Display. Field list sort. So in this one, there's actually a couple of important ones here, and this is actually the last that I'll show for the pivot table options. The field list is this list up here. It's where you have your, it's like the well of fields that you may want to drag into your report. If it's a nice short list like this, it's easy enough to look through, and by default it's alphabetical. Sometimes what you really want, though, is to have it be in the order that they are in the query, because you made the query in such a way that the first few fields that you see are the most important ones to you, and you've got so many fields in here that you don't really care about the ones that are at the bottom. So it's nice to be able to change that around. By the way, you can also change that by, you can't change that by your selection up here, which I think is too bad. So again, just go to your pivot table options, display, and make that change right there. The other thing, which I won't go into right now, is there are other layouts for pivot tables. It is certainly possible to have them be, by default, all MasterMine reports are in what we call classic pivot table layout. This is just the way things have been laid out since earlier versions of Excel. And that allows you to drag fields in and out of the report, as I've been doing here. You'll get people who have experience with pivot tables but have never actually been able to drag fields in and out, so they don't realize the convenience of doing that, because they're used to the other way where you actually have to drag them into these four regions down here in the pivot table field list toolbar. I find it much more convenient to be able to drag them in and out at will to the location that I want them. More intuitive that way as well. Okay. Finally, field settings. And again, we're going to have our drawing here right at the very end, and it's just about 2 o'clock here, so I'm just going to talk about a couple of field settings. The most important field setting, as far as I'm concerned, is subtotaling. Right-click, go to Field Settings, and actually, for that field setting, I recommend actually doing this. Do the drop-down with it. Right-click on it, and turn on the subtotaling, or right-click on it and turn off the subtotaling. There is also on the MasterMine Tools menu a subtotal on-off button. We did that because people just were oftentimes not aware of that possibility. And the other thing I want to say about that is, in your MasterMine preferences, it is also possible in the preferences of the Create dialog, it is possible to set it so that all of your fields by default are not subtotaling, or all of them are. And finally, regarding subtotals, just one last thing, that is one of your choices under the Design menu as well, where you can, en masse, turn off all the subtotals for the whole pivot table, or turn them back on. Show subtotals for, show all the subtotals, and in this case, put them at the bottom of the group. And all that did was turn it on for one of them. No, excuse me, it did turn it on for all of them. Sometimes that's too much. Usually you want some sort of a combination, maybe subtotal the leftmost column, but then not subtotal the next one over. That's where you get into a little, that's where it's just easier to actually right-click and do your subtotaling at the individual field level. The other thing I wanted to show in field settings is outline form. And this is important, I guess, for a couple of reasons, but oftentimes people want to know, can I just show within my fairy princesses, show the assigned elves, for example. That is a field level setting. I'm going to go to field settings and do that. And it comes under, there's only 2 tabs under field levels. I'm going to skip the first tab here. And here is where you can actually indicate, yes, I do want to show that. I want to show item labels in an outline form, and I actually want to allow for the next field to actually be tucked under the first one. Why do I want to do that? It's just a neater display of that sometimes. So I'll hit OK on that so you can see what that looks like. So this actually takes the two row fields, combines them kind of into one, and it changes the label on that to just say row labels, which is not a very useful label. But you can see that then within Fairy Princess, the second column is actually shifted way over to the left of it. And this allows you to actually display a lot more, because of the fact that you can do that, to display a lot more columns in a much narrower space. All right, so Carnegie, just in case there are any questions that we need to cover, let me know. Otherwise, we can go on to our drawing.
I'd say let's go on to the drawing. You guys can still post questions, though. Feel free.
Okay. So on to the drawing. And let me see if I can bring that up here. So this is our drawing. Thank you all very much for your attention and your attendance today. While Carnegie pulls her grand winner out of the list there, I'll just mention this is a free half hour of support, doing anything that you want with your goldmine data. Could be reporting, could be data management stuff, data manipulation, whatever is most useful for you. And this is also, by the way, of course, a reminder that there are multiple support options for working with MasterMine. We are happy to get online with you and actually do that work for you. And you optionally can buy a MasterMine support pack to go with your MasterMine subscription or your MasterMine software, so that your reporting can get done for you on a timely basis by people who really know goldmine and really know MasterMine.
Like yourself.
So with that, Carnegie.
All right. So let's see who's our winner this month. We have David Scherer. If I'm saying that last name right. Scherer.
Okay.
Anyways, congratulations
David. You will, I think Carnegie probably will contact David and schedule that appointment. It can happen anywhere up until the end of January, so there's not a great deal of hurry on it. But make use of it while you are thinking about MasterMine, and we will be happy to work with you. I've put up the last slide here, which is just simply your support options, so and contact information for us. So please make use of that in the remainder of the year or in the new year, and we would love to hear from you. I think we'll call it. We'll call that the end of our. No.
We have a question.
We do have a question. Okay.
We do. Kelly posts.
Save
if I want to save a MasterMine list so that I can open it in MasterMine, in the MasterMine drop-down in goldmine, how would I do that?
Okay. Good question. Let's switch back quickly to. There we are. So let's say this is a list. This is our naughty and nice list, and we want to save it so that it appears in goldmine again. Now, of course, if you just simply hit save, it's available to you because you created it, but nobody else has necessarily access to it if you saved it on your local machine. You could have also saved it to a network location and just told somebody where it was, or you could do this right here, share report. So on the MasterMine menu, under Share Report, Share actually means, we probably could have called it save and share or something like that. But that allows you to choose another Goldmine user or yourself. It defaults actually to yourself, and which taskbar you want it to launch from. And then you just hit, once you've decided that that's what you want it for it to be, you click either resave to resave the whole workbook if it hasn't been saved recently, or hit link only, which will just simply add that link to the taskbar in Goldmine. It gives you a little warning if it's located on your hard drive and you're thinking, well, I want other people to be able to use it. In this case, it's just me, so I don't mind saving it myself. Okay, taskbar item has been created. Yes. Hit cancel. Now if I go over here to Goldmine, now it's not going to be in this list immediately. This list still is going to look the same as it did before, but if I click on Customize and then turn it off again, that essentially resets my taskbar in Goldmine, so that now when I go in here to the list, I see there's my naughty and nice list. So when I want to call that back up again, I just click on it. That is obviously meant for saving reports that you personally use frequently, although of course you will find them very easily again under the Launch MasterMine dialog. But even more importantly, for those users who only use a few MasterMine reports, that's a good way to deploy them to their Goldmine taskbar, so that even though the sales manager doesn't know how to create new reports out of MasterMine and is scared when you tell him that he needs to pivot a field around to look at what the result is, if you've set up whatever the report is for him and you just want it to be able to come up refreshed and ready to go on his taskbar, then use that share dialog that I just pointed to. Okay, any other questions, Carnegie?
That looks like the last one.
Okay. Well, thank you all once again for your attendance today. Appreciate the opportunity to show you MasterMine and talk about various aspects of it. And we will see you in January. And everyone have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year and other holidays as well.
You needed a ho 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 right there.
Ho
okay.
Ho ho.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.